Welcome to the Aviation Insurance Podcast, the podcast that helps aircraft owners and aviation businesses learn and understand the complex world of aviation insurance and risk management. From the basic principles of aviation insurance to risk management techniques and updates on the aviation insurance market, the Aviation Insurance Podcast is your guide to traverse the world of aviation insurance. Now, here's your host, Tim Bonnell.
Well, welcome to the Aviation Insurance Podcast, where we talk about the fundamentals of aviation insurance. And we are now in part 2 of a short series on commercial property coverage. We're talking about this because many aircraft owners and aviation operations either own a hangar or have a lot of content at an airport location. And so commercial property policies are often there to respond on a lot of different exposures. And so part 1, we talked about the kind of overall forms of commercial property insurance, some of the major coverages, and a few particular items on how they are written. So if you haven't listened to part 1 on commercial property, I'd encourage you to go there first. Here, we're going to talk about some additional property related coverage and coverage extensions that would be helpful to know about. And the first is just the fact that an aircraft that is unairworthy, that couldn't be quickly put together and rolled out the hangar, that's going to be basically non-flying at all and unairworthy in any way, can be insured under a property policy, often at a lower rate than on its own aircraft policy. For instance, we've taken an engine out on an aircraft we're restoring over a 2-year process. That can actually be insured on a commercial property policy for the type of exposures that you would have with a tornado, a fire, those type of things that might damage or destroy that aircraft. So that's an interesting thing that you can cover on the commercial property policy that you may not have been aware of. In addition, there is an inland marine section to the aviation property policy that we use a lot in aviation. Because inland marine provides coverage for items that are in transport or that kind of move around off of the normal premises. Something we use this a lot for is those mobile equipment like fuel trucks, golf carts, tugs, lav carts. All these different mobile equipments are often the physical damage for any of them that are not licensed for road use, which would be on a business auto policy. We'll talk about that in an upcoming episode. But those that stay on the airport, not licensed for road use, we cover their physical damage here under the property policy. Something else is property in transit. A lot of aviation operations, aircraft owners, we ship engines, we ship avionics, we ship propellers and different parts that are expensive. And so if we are shipping through a lot of things here within the United States, on most carriers other than the United States Postal Service, this property in transit coverage would provide coverage for these type of items. Another good thing, some FBOs I've been in have some pretty fancy art that is worth money, and the damage to which would be of a reasonable financial expense. So you can actually cover your fine arts under the inland marine coverage. There's a number of other things like builder's risk, installation of building materials, a few other things like this, but the other big one that I would highlight on inland marine is contractors' equipment or tools and equipment. Both the insured's own equipment and tools, but also employee tools is another potential. A lot of times employees have tens and thousands of dollars worth of tools at the maintenance shop and the maintenance operation, and their homeowner's coverage does not come anywhere near covering that amount of tools. And so oftentimes a maintenance operation will provide employees tool coverage in order to make sure that their employees' tools are covered while they're at that premises. So that's a great little coverage that can be on an inland marine policy. Also, if we are shipping things internationally, an extension or a separate policy be an ocean cargo coverage. Don't let the word ocean fool you. It's land, air, or sea internationally. That's where we want to ensure our international shipments, whether that's aircraft, engines, big parts, whatever. If we're doing it frequently, we definitely want to consider an ocean cargo coverage to cover those. In addition to those major things, there's several other little extensions that are kind of good to look at. on a property policy, just the property policy itself. Debris removal. When a tornado or a hurricane wipes out a building, it actually costs a lot of money to remove the debris in the tens and thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so this debris removal extension provides that coverage for just the debris removal. So the replacement of the building is one thing, but the debris removal is another. So carrying this extension is pretty important. You can add some pollutant cleanup. Again, this is pollutant as a result of a loss, as a result of a tornado, as a result of a fire, as a result of as a result of a covered loss. If there's pollutants from that, it will clean it up. Not if it just leaks on its own, right? EDP, electronic data processing. This is a great little coverage if there's a lot of computers, copiers, a lot of value in that. And depending on the insurance company, because some people don't have this specific endorsement or an exclusion on it, but it can cover software. It can also, some policies will exclude losses where the occurrence happens off of premises. And what happens is sometimes lightning will strike a block down the road and then travel through the lines and fry some electrical equipment. And with some policies, that's actually excluded because the occurring event happened off premises. That's not true with all policies. But anyway, I always like to know how much value we have in things that could suffer electronic or magnetic damage, some sort of, mechanical breakdown or temperature-related issue out of one of these type of occurrence that are typically excluded in a standard commercial property policy. So EDP, electronic data processing. Another good one, ordinance or law. A lot of times we have a certain value to replace a building, but what happens is when we have a loss, whether it's a partial or an entire loss, it will actually cost significantly more to repair or replace it due to an ordinance or law put into by a city or county or state, especially on an older building. That can cost substantially more than the replacement cost was intended to. And so this ordinance or law comes in and provides some coverage to boost the coverage to what hopefully would cover most of, if not all, of the additional cost that was created out of the ordinance or law affecting it. Some other things, fire department service charge could be thrown in there. Property off premises. If you got property you store elsewhere in another building, that's a good extension to make sure you have your property covered there. Outdoor property can be covered. Signs can add up, and if they're not attached to the building, you want to make sure that's covered. If you got a lot of landscaping, the trees, the plants can be covered under outdoor property. And then also there usually is something for newly acquired or constructed property. A lot of you know, as you get a personal automobile, typically an insurance company will give some coverage, not always, so you got to check, but some coverage for new cars you acquire within the policy terms and up to a certain number of days. Sometimes that's 30. As long as you report it by then, you have coverage automatically. And that's a similar concept here under the commercial property policy. A couple other things I wanted to mention are the time element coverages. This is called business interruption and extra expense. And really what these do, the purpose is that when you have a covered loss, a tornado, a fire, hurricane, whatever, that makes your business unable to do business the way it usually does and produce the revenue it does to pay the expenses it does, this business interruption and extra expense provides some relief to that. So we've got a hurricane wipe everything out. We want to keep our key employees. We don't want to, if we're not able to do business the way we did, we don't want to have to lay people off. So the business interruption will come and provide some of those expense, basically provide as a form of insurance the revenues you would have earned, right, should you have been operating normally, so that you can keep those normal expenses like rent and payroll, your ongoing expenses, so that you can continue the business, that you can keep it going during this period of restoration. So they called time element policies because typically there's a time deductible and they happen over a period of time, whether it's a number of months, whether it's a quarter. And there's actually 3 or 4 different ways that these time element coverage can be written, but just understand the general concept. It's over time to provide, replace some of the income you would have earned in order to pay these key expenses.
Please
The extra
share it
expense
with
portion of
someone
that time
who would
element
benefit
coverage
from
would
this
pay the
information.
additional expenses it takes
Don't
for you
forget
to set up
subscribe in your
operations
podcast
elsewhere
player
or
so you
additional
don't miss
expenses you
any
wouldn't
new
have incurred
episodes, and to
in
help
order
our show have more
to get the
This episode
operation
is brought
running
to you by Aeris
as a
Insurance
result
Solutions,
of
your
the
flight
loss, to
plan
restore it
for
as a
navigating
result
the
of the lost
turbulence of
operations
aviation
so that it can
insurance.
keep
For more information,
generating
visit
revenue so that it can pay its
aerosinsurance.com.
bills. But these
That
two
is
things are there to help ensure the business's continuation.
Disclaimer:
If you
These
would like this
episodes are for
coverage.
educational purposes
This is
only, and due
something
to the
that's
changing
often
regulatory
overlooked
and legal
and
nature of the business,
encouraged,
some information may change over
any
time.
aviation
Having a
business
well-educated
that
and experienced
would
aviation
be
insurance broker on
majorly
your team is an
impacted by
absolute
a
requirement
loss,
for success
such
in
as a
business
fire
and for managing
or
your aircraft and aviation business
hurricane or
risks.
tornado, to consider these time element coverages. All right. Well, that is just a few of the key related coverages and coverage extensions that are available on the commercial property and coverage policy. And that's then all for this episode. And so join us again next time as we continue navigating the waypoints in aviation insurance. Until then, enjoy clear skies and unlimited visibility.
Thanks for listening to the Aviation Insurance Podcast. If you found this episode of value, please share it with someone who would benefit from this information. Don't forget to subscribe in your podcast player so you don't miss any new episodes, and to help our show have more impact. This episode is brought to you by Aeris Insurance Solutions, your flight plan for navigating the turbulence of aviation insurance. For more information, visit aerosinsurance.com. That is www.aerisinsurance.com. Disclaimer: These episodes are for educational purposes only, and due to the changing regulatory and legal nature of the business, some information may change over time. Having a well-educated and experienced aviation insurance broker on your team is an absolute requirement to success in business and for managing your aircraft and aviation business risks.